My name is Erin Carter. I'm the elementary ministry coordinator, and I see a lot of my favorite kids out there today. If I have some kids in the house, can I get a little whoop? There we go. Today I'm going to be reading John 11:1 through 44. And so I thought I would walk you through how we navigate the Bible in kids ministry. So if you have your Bible, you can raise it in the air. We're in John, which is in the New Testament, which is in the back half of your Bible. We're going to be in chapter 11, which is the big number. And we're starting in verse 1, which is the small number. And if you're feeling moved, put your finger in the air when you found it. So this is what the Gospel of John tells us today. A man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village where Mary and her sister Martha lived. Mary would later pour perfume on the Lord. She would also wipe Jesus' feet with her hair. It was her brother Lazarus who was sick in bed. So the sisters sent a message to Jesus. "Lord," they told him, "the one you love is sick." When Jesus heard this, he said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory. God's Son will receive glory because of it." Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So after he heard Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short time ago the Jews tried to kill you with stones. Are you still going back?" Jesus answered, "Aren't there 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks during the day won't trip and fall. They can see because of this world's light. But when they walk at night, they'll trip and fall. They have no light." After he said this, Jesus went on speaking to them. "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep," he said, "but I'm going there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he's sleeping, he will get better." Jesus had been speaking about the death of Lazarus, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. For your benefit, I am glad I was not there. Now you will believe, but let us go to him." Then Thomas, who was also called Didymus, spoke to the rest of the disciples. "Let us go also," he said. "Then we can die with Jesus." When Jesus arrived, he found out that Lazarus had been in the tomb for 4 days. Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem. Many Jews had come to Martha and Mary. They had come to comfort them because their brother was dead. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "I wish you had been here. Then my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you anything you ask for." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again. This will happen when people are raised from the dead on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even if they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God. I believe that you are the one who is supposed to come into the world." After he said this, she went back home. She called her sister Mary to one side to talk to her. "The teacher is here," Martha said. "He's asking for you." When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Jesus had not yet entered the village. He was still at the place where Martha had met him. Some Jews had been comforting Mary in the house. They noticed how quickly she got up and went out, so they followed her. They thought she was going to the tomb to mourn there. Mary reached the place where Jesus was. When she saw him, she fell at his feet. She said, "Lord, I wish you had been here. Then my brother would not have died." Jesus saw her crying. He saw that the Jews who had come along with her were crying also. His spirit became very sad, and he was troubled. "Where have you put him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how much he loved him?" But some of them said, "He opened the eyes of the blind man. Couldn't he have kept this man from dying?" Once more, Jesus felt very sad. He came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone in front of the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there is a bad smell. Lazarus has been in the tomb for 4 days." Then Jesus said, "Didn't I tell you that if you believe, you will see God's glory?" So he took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up. He said, "Father, I thank you for hearing me. I know that you always hear me. But I said this for the benefit of the people standing here. I said it so that they will believe that you sent me." Then Jesus called in a loud voice. He said, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out. His hands and his feet were wrapped with strips of linen. A cloth was around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the clothes he was buried in and let him go."
Thank you, Aaron. Well, good morning, you guys. Happy WinShape week. We're so excited to see what God is going to do this week in the lives of so many kids and in their families. And so just thank you so much for all your prayers, all your contributions, and volunteering. 80 volunteers. That's amazing. So we're just really looking forward to this week and all that is going to come with it. And also just welcome to all our elementary age kids that are in our service with us this Sunday and throughout the rest of this month. We're so glad to have you. I'm sorry that I'm not as cool as Christy and Aaron, and so, but I will do my very best. We are so glad you're here, though, because God will be speaking to you, and we're just excited to see what happens as you get to join us in what we're doing here. We're looking at a very famous story this morning. You've probably heard it before, and the story simply goes like this. Lazarus is dear friends with Jesus, and he has two sisters, Mary and Martha, and we know that Jesus loved everybody, right? But he had a special love for this family. And it became quickly obvious that not only was Lazarus ill, but that the illness that he had was leading him to the point of death. And so Martha sends word to Jesus saying, "Jesus, you need to come because Lazarus, the one whom you love, is sick." And this makes sense, right? Because Jesus, we've seen him throughout the Gospel of John. He's healed a man that was born blind. He healed a man who wasn't able to walk his entire life. He healed a son who was on his deathbed in another town just by simply saying a word, and the boy lived. And so Jesus is this miracle worker who helps people, who cures people, and so it makes sense to send for Jesus. And so they send for Jesus, but the passage is really interesting because it says to us in verses 5 and 6, it says, Jesus loved this family. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed. He didn't go. Which doesn't really make much sense to us because we would expect it to read something like, Jesus loved this family, and so when he received this word, he hurried as fast as he could to get there, and he made everything better. But that's not at all what it says. It says that he heard Lazarus was sick, and so he didn't go. He waited, and he waited, and he waited, and Lazarus passed away. So the natural question we would be thinking is why? Why would Jesus let something like that happen? That doesn't sound like love, you know? And our passage clearly tells us in verse 4 that all of this is happening so that God's glory would be shown through Jesus. And then in verse 15, he tells the disciples, I'm glad that I wasn't there to heal Lazarus so that you may believe. So the central question of this whole story is believe what? Believe what? Well, believe something about Jesus. Jesus wants us to believe something about him. What is it that our hearts and our minds are supposed to get around? That's so important that Jesus wants us to know this to the point that he's willing to let this man whom he loves die and let these women who he deeply cares about have these broken hearts. Like, what is it that's so important that we would believe that this would be allowed to even happen? Well, this all goes down so that you and I might see Jesus and understand him and believe upon him in a certain way, that we would walk through life very differently with a whole new kind of perspective. These stories in the Bible, and I would propose to you all the Bible is like this, but these stories in particular, like the Lazarus resurrection story, are here as these sort of discipleship deposits into our hearts. I don't know if you know this, but every time you read the Bible, when God's speaking to you, he's depositing things into you, belief into you, knowledge into you. Because there's going to come times in your life where you're going to have to make a withdrawal on that, right? You're going to have to spend it in some way in order to get through what it is that you're going through. I mean, when I was a little kid, when I was in elementary school, I never had any money, right? You shouldn't work when you're an elementary-age kid. That would be illegal, right? But I would only get money if my grandparents gave me money at Christmas or my birthday. And when I mowed the lawn and when I cleaned up all the dog poo in the yard, I got $5 for that one. So we got the big bucks there. But I never, if I was a good kid, if I was a good steward of those resources, I would have put that money in my savings account. But I was that kid who the moment I got it, I was like, let's go to the store. I want to buy another pack of baseball cards. You know, that was like my thing as a child. But as you grow up, right, you make a living, right? You earn some income. Maybe you come upon some money that was given to you through an inheritance or something. And you take that money, and good stewards, they will take that money and they will put it in the bank, right? And so when things happen in life, like you find out your tree is diseased and you have to pay to have it cut out, or you go to the ER and you got to pay your deductible, you know? Your washing machine goes out, right? All three of those things, in fact, have happened to me this month, okay? So these things happen in life, and when those things happen, how are you going to pay for it, right? Hopefully there's been deposits happening in your life that when comes the time, you can withdraw on that so you can get through those times, right? The same is true for our lives spiritually. God is constantly making deposits into our lives so that when we go through seasons, we have a worldview. We have a foundation. We have resources that get us through those seasons. And so this morning, maybe you're here and you are like going through it. The bank's running dry, right? This is a great deposit this morning for you. But maybe you're here this morning and you're like, life's pretty great. It's been an awesome summer. Nonetheless, there is such an important deposit that needs to be made in your heart today because no one gets through this life unscathed. And eventually, we all have to face that greatest trial, and that would be our own grave. And so this morning, I just want to point out a few things in our story that give us this perspective, that helps us walk through difficulty. The first is we see clearly what grief feels like. What grief feels like. In verse 18, Jesus arrives in Bethany, which is this little village outside of Jerusalem, and before he's even entered the village, Martha runs out to meet him. She meets him outside the village and confronts him, and she's very upset. She has this act of faith, but she's still upset, and she asks him a question, which we'll get at in just one second. But then after they have their little interaction, she runs back into the village. She goes to Mary, who was unwilling to go out and meet Jesus to begin with. And she says, Mary, Jesus is calling for you. And so Mary goes out and meets Jesus outside of the village again. And when she gets to Jesus, she falls on her face. And she is just distraught. And she asks Jesus the same question that her sister Martha asked. And it's a question that gives us this perfect understanding of exactly what grief feels like. Well, what's their question? It's the same question. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Right? This would not have happened. God, where were you? In other words, it's too late. You didn't show up. I mean, I imagine this is not the first time they'd asked this question amongst each other. I imagine for all those days while they're sitting next to Lazarus' bedside saying, we've sent for Jesus, like, where is he? Why is he not here yet? And then the moment where he's passed away and they've wrapped him up and they've put all these spices and ointments on his body and they laid him in the tomb, it's been 4 days now. Where was he? I thought he loved us. Right? Isn't he the one who loves the sick and the hurting? I mean, have you ever felt that way? Have you ever had that where are you, God moment in your life? Where you felt like you needed him and he seemingly just didn't seem like he was there in your life. You asked, where were you, God, when so-and-so passed away? Right, where were you when my parents went through that divorce? God, where were you when my marriage dissolved? Or my spouse cheated on me? All right, where were you when we were in that horrible financial situation and I thought this job would be the perfect way to provide for our family finally and I didn't even get the job? I mean, where were you, God? When we raised our kids like the best that we possibly could, and we tried to teach them about you, and now they've just wandered away from you, right? Where were you? When my dad was drunk all those nights, and we were terrified. Right? Isn't this what grief feels like? Like if we were to put the feeling of grief into a sentence, wouldn't this be it? This feeling of loneliness and vacancy, of wondering where God is in the midst of it all. This is a natural question that you will always have in a process of grief. Sure, you might be numb, you might be sad, and you'll think, man, there's no way that I'll ever be happy again. The thought of being happy feels like a distant memory when you're in the thick of grief. You might even be angry. You might wonder today if something is wrong with you because your grief just won't go away and it kind of scares you a little bit. This is all because you've experienced loss, right? You've experienced the loss of something you've loved or someone that you've loved. They're no longer present, right? In their absence, you wonder, where's God? He seems absent too. These are discipleship deposits in our lives. Even if you're not there this morning, you need to process this now because future bills are going to have to get paid. And what I want you to see is how Jesus here, he doesn't correct Martha. He doesn't correct Mary. You need to know that. It's not wrong. It's not sinful to just tell God how you feel. Like he already knows. You can just be honest with him. He's not like, whoa, I know that was bottled up in there. He's like, I know. He's not insecure, right? He can handle your questions. Maybe you're in a place of grief today. We want to help you, right? You need community. I mean, we have a prayer team here every single week. And the reason this prayer team is up front at the end of the services is just to be there for you, to pray with you, process things with you. They want to just be present in your life. I'd love to talk to you. You can reach out to me or any other leaders on our staff or your life group leader or whoever it is. I mean, you need to walk with people through this. This is also why, Lord willing, we're hoping to start a grief share program this October, because you need to walk with people through that. To know that it's going to be okay even when life seems to be flickering. I know nothing can be said this morning that will magically make things different. Nothing could be done to just like change the way that you feel. But I just need you to know this morning that grief does not have the final say in your life. It doesn't last forever, even if it feels like it'll last forever. Our text today promises us that it won't. So this is what grief feels like, yes, but secondly, I want you to see what love looks like. We see two clear images from Jesus to hold on to this morning that show you what love looks like even in the midst of hardship. Look first at his tears. Look at his tears. This is such a unique feature in this story in the life of Jesus. So unique. Look in verse 33. What does it say? When Jesus saw Mary weeping and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved. The word means indignant. It means he's really angry about it. This is not okay. He's really bothered. Right? He's deeply moved in his spirit and he's greatly troubled. And so he says, "Where have you laid him?" And they said to him, "Lord, come and see." And then verse 35, the shortest verse in all the Bible. If you've never memorized a verse before, you can start right here. Right? This was like my first verse, you know. But it's an amazing verse. Like, I don't know who the guy was or whoever who put verses in the Bible because they weren't in the original manuscripts. But I find it really interesting that whoever did that looked at this two-word sentence and said, that needs its own verse. For a reason. A very powerful reason. What is it? Jesus wept. He's troubled. There's so much grief and weeping around him, and so Jesus sees Mary weeping, Jesus sees the crowd weeping, and so he weeps. See, this story tells us, it shows us how in our grief, Jesus stands with his people in solidarity. He sits in it with them. And he's angry about it, right? In a righteous sort of way. He hates it. He's deeply troubled, and he's angry at the reality of death because death is only a reality in this world because sin is a reality in this world. Like, need I remind us that the Bible begins with God creating this beautiful and perfect world where people walk with him in such harmony and intimacy, and yet, because we decided to go our own way, sin entered this world, and as a result of that, death entered this world. Death destroyed all that was good because sin infected it all. And so there's something powerful then in this story that's being offered to us. It's knowing clearly what God hates. It's knowing clearly what God thinks about your suffering. Right? What does he think about the hardships that you're going through? He hates it. He hates it. Here, Jesus, the Son of God, the Word made flesh, he's nose to nose with the effects of sin in this world. And he joins Martha in her anger, and he's deeply moved, right? And then one of the most powerful verses again, he joins Mary and the crowd in their weeping. The Son of God, who placed the stars in the heavens, wept with Mary and a crowd of brokenhearted people. Now, I don't know about you, but I still have a question. I mean, why would Jesus weep with them if he knew that in 10 minutes he was going to turn their sorrow into a celebration? Like, why would he weep with them? Right? When they're so sad, he's like, hey, I know what's coming. Why would you do that? I mean, have you ever watched like a movie the second time? Right? We all have, you know? I watched The Patriot this weekend. Again, great movie, right? Just wanted to celebrate our nation's independence, you know? And so I put on Mel Gibson, and it was just as good as I remember it, honestly. But I remember the first time I saw that movie, like in the theater as a teenager. And I was watching, it was so intense. I was like on the edge of my seat, and I had to remind myself, okay, we win the war. Like I remember we like beat the English. You know, like I remind myself of that because I was worried we were going to lose and whatnot. But even then, in the course of that whole narrative, even though you know the U.S. is going to win and the colonies and all that, I still, you know, there was all these other plot lines that you're just like, what's going to happen here? But even now, as I'm watching that movie this weekend, like I know what happens. It still feels intense, but I don't see it the same way. I don't feel the same way I felt because I know what happens, right? It's like riding a ride at a theme park or something. Like if you've ever ridden like Rise of the Resistance at Disneyland, the first time you ride that thing, you're like, what is happening? And the second time, you're like, okay, I got it, you know? Like it's still amazing, but you know what's happening. The second time you go through something, if you knew what was happening, you wouldn't feel the same emotions, would you? And so if you're Jesus and you know what's coming in 10 minutes, why would you cry? Why weep? Well, it's for the simple answer we've already been given. It's so that you would believe. It's so that you would believe. Believe what? What Jesus thinks about the suffering you're going through. That you would believe that. You have a God in the flesh weeping at the sight of other people's sorrow, and that's what the buildup of verse 33 is showing you. And whether it's 100 years or 1,000 years, it's not much different than 10 minutes in your own life, which means Jesus can already see the beautiful resolution to your story. He can already see that beautiful moment when all the sad things in your life become untrue, and he wipes away every tear from your eyes, and there's no more ache in your heart when you see him finally face to face. This is why the great German theologian Jürgen Moltmann, I love how he summed up Christ's love for us right here. And he said this, he said, God weeps with us so that we may someday laugh with him. He weeps with us so that one day we would laugh with him. Is this your picture of Jesus while you're walking through your grief? This is what love looks like. Look at his tears. But secondly, look at his offer. Look at his offer in verse 25. This is all before he weeps. This is before he said anything to the Lazarus. He says to Martha, before he even talks to Mary, he says, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this, Martha? Do you believe this, Pathway? I find it so interesting in this story that when Martha's so upset, Jesus doesn't say, hey, just hold on a second. I got a trick up my sleeve. I'm going to calm down. I know you're upset, but calm down. I'm going to do something here. And he tells Martha, and Martha's like, goes in and tells Mary, Mary, stop crying. Jesus is going to go and raise Lazarus from the dead. And none of that happens. He doesn't disclose anything to her. Do you see this? In that moment, when her worst case scenario happens, Jesus offers her like really solid hope, but it's not in her circumstance changing at all. He just offers her hope in himself. Right? He says something so strong. This is like the strongest foundation that you and I as Christians, we build our life upon these words right here. So strong. What does he say? I am the resurrection and the life. Do you believe this? If you do, even if you die, you will live. And we will all die. But you will live. Isn't this exactly what love looks like? When someone offers you not just their tears, but they offer you themselves. I mean, Jesus says in the smack dab middle of your hardest moments, I am right here. Am I enough? Do you trust me? Do you believe in me? He's offering you the ministry of his presence, and these are not empty words. He's offering us himself in love. The late Tim Keller, I love how he commented on this passage, but he told the story about how in his earlier years, every year, he would have this reoccurring nightmare. And his wife, Kathy, said it was so flattering, this reoccurring nightmare he'd have. And in this reoccurring nightmare, he would have this horrible dream that his wife, Kathy, had passed away. And she was flattered by this, she would say, because it just showed her that obviously her death was his greatest fear. But nonetheless, he said, something has happened to her in these dreams, and in my dream, I'm desperately trying to figure out how to go on life without her. He says, but let me tell you something really weird about these dreams. He said, I almost like having the nightmare now. Because the first minute after I wake up, it's so unbelievably great to wake up and say, oh my, it was only a bad dream. Everything bad I thought I was living through has come untrue. It's not like I'm awakened to just have someone give me something to make the pain better. It's not like when I awake, someone says, I'm sorry your wife died. Here's another wife. No. And waking up, the dream itself becomes untrue. It's a wonderful feeling to say, oh, it's morning. It was only a bad dream. And so he says, do you know what Jesus Christ is saying when he says, I am the resurrection? He's not saying that he will give you a nicer place, like some consolation prize to numb the pain. No, he's going to make everything that happened in our pain seem like a bad dream. He'll make everything bad come untrue. Jesus Christ is not giving us consolation. He's giving us himself, which in him is resurrection life. That is what love looks like. Lastly, what does glory sound like? This is what we see clearly in verses 38 through the end. We see in verse 38, it says, Jesus, again, is deeply moved. Again. And he comes to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Some scholars say the word deeply moved literally means snorted like an animal in anger right before it charges you. I actually like how John Calvin said, this is Jesus entering the ring like a wrestler preparing for a contest with a hated foe. The violent tyranny of death which he came to overcome now stands before his eyes. So he goes to the tomb like a wrestler about ready to get in the ring, like an MMA fighter or something like that, right? And Jesus says, take away the stone. And Martha says, that's a bad idea. Jesus, it's been 4 days. That's going to smell pretty gnarly. Right? And this is actually a really important part because John's now brought up a bunch of times that it's been 4 days. And this is for a reason. Because in the Jewish mind, the spirit hung around the body for 3 days. And they thought this just so there wasn't a misdiagnosis. But on the fourth day, decomposition began to set in and the body really started to stink. And so they're like, okay, the spirit's gone for good. So in other words, in a Jewish mindset, Lazarus was not just dead. He was like mega dead, right? Like he was dead, undeniably dead. And so Jesus says, roll the stone away. And she's like, that is a bad idea. And look at what Jesus says in verse 40. Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? This is how this whole thing was set up, right? This illness, verse 4, does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so the Son of God may be glorified through it. And so they roll away the stone, and Jesus prays to his Father, and John tells you the reason why he prays is just so everybody else around there would know that he was the Son of God, that he really was sent from God into this world to be the Messiah. And I love this. After he's finished praying, what does he say in verse 43? He cried out with a loud voice. He literally yells, he screams, Lazarus, come out. And the man who had died came out. His hands and feet were bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, unbind him and let him go. Lazarus was mega dead. And Jesus commanded him to get up from death. And he did. Like so powerfully, with his own voice. You would have thought he was taking a nap or something. Like he was dead. And Jesus' voice says things, and dead bodies obey him. I mean, do you know anybody with that kind of power in this world? With the ability to speak and dead people walk out of their graves? That's why I think some person just assumed this, but I think it's an interesting thought. One scholar said the reason why he said the name Lazarus was because if he had not said Lazarus, all of the dead would have come out of their graves. Guys, that is what glory sounds like. Think about this. Witnesses saw this. People wrote this down. A guy died, was dead for 4 days, and someone yells and calls his name, and he just walks out of the grave. I mean, this really happened. Like in your real world of budgets and bills and yard work and laundry and vacations and school and all the things, right? The things that you are living in every single day that feel so mundane and just you got to get through, like this real world that you live in. Like that happened. What are you going to do about it? Do you believe it? I mean, the evidence is pretty clear because this was the last straw that would lead to Jesus' death. It was that earth-shaking. I don't blame him, right? He breaks up Lazarus' funeral by beginning his own. People are going to seek to kill him, and then you get this important prophecy by this really horrible high priest named Caiaphas. In verse 51, what does he say? He prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation, referring to Israel, and not for the nation only, but also to gather into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. So from that day on, they made plans to put him to death. Do you see this? Jesus is the resurrection and the life because he is the one who couldn't die. Yet he would lay his life down by going to a cross and dying as a substitute for our sin in our place, right? The very thing that led and caused death into this world to begin with, our sin, he's going to go to a cross and die there for it, only to have his stone rolled away 3 days later, because the grave would look at him and say, "You do not belong here." Let me tell you how much we need this prophecy from Caiaphas, how much we need this to be the end of the story and not just when Lazarus walks out, because if the story ended on verse 44 where Lazarus comes out and they unbind him and then we just go, wasn't that amazing, right? It wouldn't be enough, would it? Because what would the bummer be? Sure, Lazarus is alive now, but one day he's going to have to be wrapped up again and placed in a tomb again. And that's the weird thing about our hardships and suffering, isn't it? The things that we always want reversed, they're just tweaks. They're like temporary fixes. Sure, I got that fixed now, but what's next, right? Or I still have to face the grave someday, don't I? So I can have my circumstances change today, but I'm just delaying the inevitable. Death is the inevitable. I brought a comic for you guys. I don't know if it's like The Far Side or whatever it is, but I just liked it because it shows you a tombstone of a man, fake person obviously, says something like he gave up smoking in the 60s, 10 years later, he gave up drinking, 10 years later he gave up meat, and he still died 10 years later, right? And I want to be clear, right? You should take care of your body, right? You should steward your body well. We all should, right? Do that, please. But no matter how well you steward it, death comes to us all. That's why it's called our last enemy. It's why I think even it's the last miracle of Jesus and John. Because we are seeing here that Jesus has authority over death. See, whatever happens to us, death is not the end. He offers himself as the resurrection for you because he died not for the nation only, but for the nations who are scattered abroad. This was first announced out in the Middle East, and it's reached all the way to the Inland Empire. And it's continuing to go all over this world. God is at work gathering his children under his care. And his children are the people who hear this message. They've heard the glory of Jesus. And they go, I believe that. I believe that. I'll stake my life on it. And do you see why Jesus allowed all this to happen, you guys? It's so that you would know. It's so that you would have this deposit of how your whole life is reordered now. Like you have a whole new baseline to your worst case scenario. I don't know if anybody in here is like a worst case scenario thinker. Anybody in here a worst case scenario thinker? I am not a worst case scenario thinker, probably to a fault. But my wife, I got permission to tell you that she is the worst case scenario thinker. So I have some really interesting conversations with her at times. One of my favorites was early on in our marriage. She told me we can't sleep with our bedroom window open because maybe a raccoon will come in and bite her face off, and I was like, okay, haven't thought about that before, or even 4th of July, we had such a great time going to the Schultz's house right across from Moore Middle School to watch the fireworks. I mean, Redlands does it right, those massive, huge fireworks. It was such an incredible show watching those things and celebrating our freedom and whatnot. And I'm standing there with my arm around Elizabeth just watching these fireworks, and we were barely into the show where she leans over and she's like, what if the fireworks fell over and started shooting at us? And I was like, well, I've learned to just say something like, well, I guess it's possible. I guess that's possible. Because it technically is, right? But there's this worst case, we all have a worst case. Even I said I'm not a worst case scenario thinker, but I still have a worst case scenario. And we all think about our worst case scenarios. And worst case scenario thinking always starts with, well, what if this? What if that? What if this happens? What if that happens? See, this story is fascinating because Jesus is telling us that there is a new baseline for the worst case scenario in your life. If you believe his offer of himself to you, there's a whole new baseline. John is saying, let's just take the worst case possible scenario that you might think of and just throw verse 25 into it now. Like if you're a Christian, throw verse 25 into it. I am the resurrection and the life. Just throw that into your worst, most absolute, dreadful, where are you, God moment, and let's just think about it now. Right? All of a sudden, your what ifs turn into even ifs, don't they? Even if this happens, even if that happens, Jesus is the resurrection and the life. He is the resurrection and the life. He's ultimate, right? He's gone through the grave and he's come out the other side. And so you might resonate with the words of Billy Graham, who said you'll be a whole different kind of person walking around this world, because what did he say? He says, one fine day you will hear that Billy Graham is dead. Don't you believe it? I'll be more alive than ever. I will have just changed addresses. That's the truth, right? You'll be so weird and different if you believe Jesus is the resurrection and the life, because you have this like deposit of solid hope in your life, right? You will be alive in such a real way. And what I don't mean by that is I don't think you're going to face suffering and smile and go, oh, it's not a big deal. No, it is a big deal. That is really awful. That is dark. That is painful, right? It shouldn't be that way. It doesn't mean you just smile it all off. No, but you still at least go, God is with me. And he's done something about it. This is what glory sounds like. It sounds like Jesus' voice saying, come out of the grave. I am the resurrection and the life. I am greater than your worst case scenario. See, Jesus knows that we can tend to live like we've forgotten this great hope that we have in him. And so he's told us to regularly take time as a church family to remember that he is the resurrection and the life. And we do this once a month by taking communion together.